Hey guys, Andy here from Mediocre Hobbies, coming at you with more old world goodness with the launch of the new Orc range, or should I say the re-release of the old Orc range. I thought it was time that I painted up that beautiful new Forge World Warboss. Absolutely incredible. He's actually a Black Orc Big Boss. Stunning sculpt, and it's one of the new miniatures. I think the Orcs only got 2 new miniatures, and one of them isn't even out yet. The Shaman with the troll skin over the top of his head. I don't know when he's going to be released. I'm very much looking forward to that, but no sign of him so far. But the beautiful Black Orc Big Boss is out, and I decided I would make a video on him. Now, when I started the video, I realized that he's quite a complicated miniature. There's like a lot of parts to him. He's got like detail on top of detail on top of detail. And I realized that for a lot of painters out there, that might seem kind of daunting. So I thought that what I do in today's video is I would try and focus on that as a concept and try and talk you through some of the ways in which I tackle miniatures like this, how I paint the different parts, in what order and why, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll have a little bit of a clearer understanding of how to tackle miniatures with that much detail, and it'll make your painting a little bit easier. At least that's my hope. Before I get into it, I just want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. Without you guys, I could not continue doing this, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. If you are interested in getting involved in that with everybody else, it's linked in the description below. You get access to a private Discord server and an extra video every single day from me on that channel. So if you want to help me out there, check the link. Okay, without further ado, let's get stuck in and paint this epic orc miniature. Okay, so this is the amazing new Black Orc Big Boss from, I keep wanting to say Forge World, but Forge World doesn't exist anymore. It's just from normal Games Workshop, but it's a resin piece. It's like from the 15 plus range, so it's like an advanced miniature. It is absolutely stunning. Now, at the beginning of making this video, so when I started this project, I was just going to do a regular, talk you through my process of painting it, just so you guys will be able to paint it. And I realized that it's actually a little bit more complicated than it looks. And I don't mean, each section of it is difficult. It's not hard to paint fur. It's not hard to paint orc skin. It's not hard to paint metals. But the model is extremely busy. And I've heard a lot of people online for years now talk about the fact that Games Workshop makes their miniatures a little bit too complicated. And they like to kind of over embellish things with details and add a little bit too much. And I absolutely understand where they're coming from. The fact that I've gone back to the old world and are painting some of the older miniatures, I can tell you that I am actually really, really enjoying some simpler miniatures. But I can't help myself when beautiful new centerpieces come out like this. I have to include them. So it was actually at this stage in the process where I got to like the metallics. And I realized, you know what, I think I should change the kind of pitch of this video and try and help you guys understand that it's not that complicated to kind of, fight your way through a complicated miniature. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but yeah. So for instance, I knew I was going to start with the skin. The reason I started with the skin is because when I was taught how to paint many, many years ago, there was a concept known as dressing the miniature. Now, dressing the miniature refers to you start painting a miniature from the very, very center of the miniature. And I don't mean the center of that. I mean as in from his skin. So you're basically painting everything from the skin, and then you're painting everything that's on top of the skin, and then you're painting everything that's on top of that, and on top of that, and on top of that. So you're painting your way out from the inside. The reason for this is you don't, for instance, want to paint all of the armor and all of the fur and then have to go back in and try and get around everything to get at the skin and be careful not to hit or ruin anything else. And I did live by that philosophy for many, many years. But there are certain times and certain things that do, in fact, change that for me, especially with the introduction of contrast paint. You guys know that I'm just such a huge fan of contrast paint, speed paint, express paint, whatever ones you like to use. I think they're just amazing. I think they have changed the game for painting, especially army painting. And I love them and I use them so much. So when I'm working with things like contrast paints, I tend to go from lightest color to darkest color, while still trying to maintain the dressing a miniature philosophy. But I will sacrifice that philosophy in order to go from lightest to darkest. And the reason for that is the darker contrast will go over the lighter contrast as I'm painting. So if I want to paint a necklace, for instance, so this guy's got an entire ring of necklaces and gubbins and severed heads and teeth and all that kind of stuff wrapped around his neck. It is a very complicated part of the miniature. You kind of look at it and you go, where do I start with this? What do I do? How do I do it? And I think the important thing is to just start getting colors on starting from the lightest and working your way back. So for instance, if I start with something like Skeleton Horde, I can pretty much cover the entire necklace in Skeleton Horde because it is such a pale, pallid color. And then I can decide that, okay, the wires holding the severed heads onto the cord are going to be this color, and then I go to a slightly darker brown, or obviously I'm going to paint the severed heads in a skin tone. They seem to be quite fresh. Okay, perfect. Then I'm going to throw a skin tone on top of those, and you basically just keep adding colors going from lightest to darkest, and you don't have to worry about making any mistakes or doing anything like that because you can cover it with the darker color. And like I said, back in the day before contrast, you would look at this necklace and you'd be like, okay, I gotta decide how I want to paint the actual main necklace. Then all the cords holding the parts on. Then we have skulls, teeth, severed heads, and one of the severed heads is human, one of the severed heads is dwarves. So obviously that's 5, 6, 7 colors just to base coat stuff in, and it can get really daunting. It can seem quite intimidating. For instance, as I grabbed Agro's Dunes here, I decided I'm going to base coat in the unfortunate, sad, dead damsel, which is on his banner pole. I only realized that after I constructed it, that the severed head, or both severed heads that are on his spike pole, is actually the skull of a Bretonnian horse and the skull of a damsel. Perhaps it is the damsel's horse. It is very sad side, as I'm such a huge Bretonnian fan, and to see such an epic creature like a damsel being cut down and worn as a trophy is crazy. I do believe he should have some sort of like magic resistance or something from some after effect of her power, but you know, who can say? Then, like I said, going on to Guilliman Flesh and applying this, for instance, on those severed heads, and then going around the outside of the pelt. So he's got this big pelt across over his shoulder, whether that be a wolf or some other crazy creature. But if you go by the reference picture that's on the Games Workshop website, the edges of it all are like flayed skin. We're going to leave the fur white, well, a grey seer color that we base coated the miniature. And then we're just going to shade that whole thing down. I think that's another thing you can do. You let the shade do some of the work. Try and understand that if something needs to be painted a pale pallid color like a white, just leave it to spray. Throw the shade over the top of that when you get to the shade stage, and then layer up from the bottom. It looks great. Gargak Sewers being, once again, the darker color, so we're going into the dark browns. Now this is here an example of where I've sacrificed the dressing the miniature for going for the darkest color. So for instance, now I have to get past the armor. It's not too much of a big deal because we still have to shade the miniature, and then we're going to highlight it afterwards. So if we do make a mistake, we can repair it. But Gargak Sewer is, of course, the darkest color. We're going to paint this on his trousers, and then all the straps and stuff that hold his armor in place. So big straps go up over his shoulder and down his back and stuff like that. And I think that's another thing to understand is, like, when you're painting these complicated pieces, because I threw something like Skeleton Horde or Agro's Dunes down across the huge portion of detail that goes around his neck, I don't really have to do a whole lot with certain parts of it. So for instance, with the necklace around his neck, I keep calling it a necklace, which seems so dainty for something that an Orc Warboss wears around his neck. But like, I don't actually layer or change the color from the Agro's Dunes at all for the strap or the middle section. I pay a little bit of attention to the severed heads and the teeth and the other charms that are on his person, but the cords and the strap, I just basically ignore them. They got Agro's Dunes and they're going to get shaded with the whole model Null and Oil, and then they're really nice. And you also have to understand the concept that people aren't picking up this miniature and are going to be like, oh, I wonder how he painted the cords that hold the skull. They might look at the skulls, they might look at his axe and his face, but all the minuscule details that exist on this miniature that you just block in with a color and shade down, you can just leave. It's not that big a deal. You'll see this bit now. I'm shading those cords, and you will see by the end that I layer up, like I said, all of the severed heads and stuff. So at the end of this video, I challenge you to look at the detail around his neck and see if you notice anything wrong. And if you don't immediately notice anything wrong, then I don't think there is anything wrong. The Null and Oil is, of course, a great choice for shading down all of the metallic parts. The skin, obviously, is a black orc, so his skin is supposed to be darker than a standard orc's skin. So Null and Oil will do that. I'm still going to pull it up quite bright with the layering stage because I do like my orcs to be a little bit brighter. Sue me. I just think it looks cooler. I want them to stand out on the tabletop, especially something like this, the boss. I thought briefly about doing his armor in a color, like they were speed freaks or goth or anything, but for the old world, I think I just really want to have a nice dark, grungy kind of metal color. for the squad of Black Orcs. I want them to be marching across the battlefield and seem heavily armored and dangerous. And once you have all of those sections blocked in and the model shaded, usually you would think now the hard part starts, but in fact we've gotten the hard part out of the way now, because we now have all of the details in the model pulled apart, all separated. We know exactly where the metallic starts and ends, where all the gubbins start and end, his fur starts and ends, skin. So when you're layering it, you can see very clearly where you're supposed to layer and what you're supposed to layer. And that's why I always talk about the idea of once a model is base coated and washed, I can start painting it. And by that I mean I get to enjoy painting it, because I'm not wondering what the hell is that bit, and does that bit bleed into this bit, and what color should that bit be? I feel like I've already kind of overcome all of those problems. So when I quickly add a couple of greens and layer up his skin, all of a sudden the model starts to jump off of the, I was going to say page, he's not on a page. Jump out of the camera at you. It just look really cool. Let me know if there's any other miniatures that kind of jump out at you. Like, I think things like Bretonnians actually tend to be fairly easy to paint. You know what to do with them. It's just a big layer of cloth, some armor and chainmail, but basically a horse. Like, there's not much to them. Whereas if you do something like the Tomb King's range, for instance, suddenly you look at this miniature and it's like bone and mummy wraps, which are very close in color but need to be different enough in color so that they stand out. Then they're lavished in gold ornamentation with silver, and then there's those little triangles that need to be red and blue and red and blue and red and blue, and then all the gems and gemstones, and then imagine if you meant it on a chart. So sometimes trying to figure out where all those colors need to go and what they are can be a bit daunting. But if you follow this kind of process, like for instance, a Tomb King would be aggros dunes across the entire miniature. Paint the gold over all the armor parts, including all the bits that are supposed to be red and blue or diamonds and stuff like that. Then you could shade the whole model from there. And it's only when you get to the layering stage you decide to pull the bone in one direction and the cloth in another direction. You layer up all the gold as best you can. Then you add the red and blues. It's simple. It's elegant. It works. I don't know. I would hate the idea that people get daunted by. I've always talked about this as the like mission objective of my channel is to help people overcome their fear of painting. And I know that sounds silly, but there are so many people out there who are afraid to paint certain things. I don't mean they're afraid to pick up a brush and put paint on models, but how many times have you thought about the concept of saving this miniature until later on because I'll be a better painter then? Or, oh, I couldn't paint that like that, so there's no point in buying it. If you see, a big beautiful monster comes out by Games Workshop that you see that the Envy Metal team has painted, and all of a sudden you get super daunted and think, oh, I can't do that, so I'm never going to buy it. I think that's one of the biggest kind of strengths of the program where Games Workshop sends their kits to other people, because you get to experience those kits painted by people who aren't Envy Metal painters. We're just average painters like you guys. And we can all kind of learn together and get really nice miniatures on the table and be happy about it. I think my favorite example of that is my Talia Vedra model, the boss of the Cities of Sigma range. So it's this awesome kind of female heavy plate wearing lady riding on top of a crazed manticore. And it looks like an absolute nightmare to paint. And the job that the Envy Metal team did was so good that it just becomes really intimidating. And the video that I did is just so simple. I think I painted the entire manticore with like 3 colors, and people were shocked by the result that I got. People were thanking me in the comments, and they can finally go away and get their own ones and paint it up now. And that's the best comments that I get are when I post videos like that and people post, I now feel confident enough to go and buy that miniature. Because to me that tells me that those guys have been looking at that miniature for a while now, wanted to paint it, but decided not to because they thought they couldn't paint it. I just think that's so sad. And hopefully, if I keep making videos like this, painting big monsters, or talking you guys through some of the tips and tricks, I don't want to overload you with information in each video. So, over the course of a couple of years, I guess, hopefully I can impart whatever wisdom I do have into some videos that you guys can learn from, and then hopefully get painting as well. Let there be no model that stands in your way. As you can see, the layering process was nothing special. It was absolutely no different to layering any other miniature. Just choose appropriate colors for skin, fur, armor, leather, and then just carefully layer them up. There's no crazy technique. There's no wet blending, or there's no glazes everywhere or anything like that. It's literally from pot. You know, I use a wet palette just to thin it a little bit. That's about as fancy as I get. There's not even any mixes of colors. These are straight colors. Right now I'm showing you Ushabti Bone because the next color I'm going to use is a pure coat of Ushabti Bone. There's no craziness. You don't need to mix. You don't need to glaze. You don't need airbrushes or, you know, inks or enamel washes and wiping it off or any of that jazz. Standard traditional base coating, washing and layering will get you as far as you want to go in painting. I'm starting to rant now. I do apologize if it's coming away as a little bit ranty, but I just want everyone to love painting as much as I do. Get nice armies on the table. Feel proud of them. Take them to events and tournaments and show them off. I mean, I started painting a Bretonnian army for the old world when it kind of got announced. Not announced, but when we know we had a kind of solid date that it was coming. And right now I stand at about 50, 60 knights painted. I've got about 3,000 points painted, and I'm super proud of the result that I have. I didn't paint them all in one day. I didn't paint them all in 1 week. I didn't paint them all in 1 month. I took them a couple of nights at a time, a character here or there. Very simple techniques, and all of a sudden I've got what seemed back in the day to me being one of the most complicated armies to paint to now just being a thing where if you take a knight one at a time, you can really just bash through as many as you want. Decided to throw some nihilic oxide on this piece. I know that nihilic oxide doesn't really exist on silvers, so if the comment section is going to blow up telling me that this doesn't belong there, I know. I just liked a bit of spot color. I didn't want the silver to be that dominant. Obviously wearing a lot of silver plate armor, a lot of chainmail, so the silver was just kind of overpowering the model a little bit for me. So I added a little bit of nihilic oxide in there, helped kind of shade down all the brass bits that I put on and run around some of the silver parts to break up those bits as well. Just adds another little spot of color as well. And with that, we had our final finished Black Orc Big Boss from, I want to say Forge World again, from Games Workshop. This guy will lead my unit of Black Orcs. I have a box of 20 Black Orcs. Therefore, if I add this guy in, that's 21, which for me will be 4 ranks of 7 Black Orcs. I think that's going to look epic. Oh, sorry, 3 ranks of 7 Black Orcs. I can math me. I think that's going to look epic as like a centerpiece boss unit of my army. Here he is as he would stand on the tabletop. Like I said, super proud of the result. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if it was helpful in any way or whether you think it was just a rambling mess. I need to learn either way. Thanks, guys. Okay, guys, the Black Orc Big Boss is finished, and I am very happy with him. He is a kind of a slightly higher than tabletop standard. I'm really pleased with the result. I'd be more than happy to put him on the tabletop and have him lead my big unit of new Black Orcs. Let me know what you guys thought about this video. Did you find the tips and tricks that I mentioned in this video helpful or useful? Did you enjoy the final result of the Orc? Or is there any other tips and tricks that you would like to see in the future? Please do let me know in the comments below as well. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give it a like. Ask me any questions you want in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any more uploads. I'll see you guys in the next video.